Welcome to Mastering Your Financial Life, hosted by Judy Heft, the founder and CEO of Judith Heft and Associates Financial and Lifestyle Concierge. This year, they're celebrating 26 years in business. In every episode, Judy interviews professionals who help others successfully manage their financial lives. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Judy is the author of 2 books, How to Be Smart, Successful, and Organized with Your Money for a Better Today and Tomorrow, and her latest book, Mastering Your Financial Life Cycles, How to Successfully Manage Money in Every Decade of Life. You can read chapters of her books and catch prior episodes of this show at www.judithheft.com. Now here's the host of Mastering Your Financial Life, Judy Heft.
Hey everybody, welcome. I'm so thrilled to have Sara Meyers as my 21st guest. I guess that means we're legal now, right? We can party after this. She's a partner at Enea, Scanlan Sirignano law firm. A boutique elder law and trust and estates law firm located in White Plains, New York. And Sara focuses on trust and estates, elder law planning, Medicaid issues, and planning. So I'm really thrilled to have you here, Sara. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
You're welcome. And just by the way, it's also blackjack. So I definitely won the lottery today with that.
Oh, there we go. All right, we're going to have to do that later. Maybe we'll have to buy lottery tickets. So really, I'm really thrilled to have you. So one of the things, I was wondering that you want to talk about is, I know, why is estate planning so important? So many people think estate plan. I don't have an estate. I'm just a small person. I rent an apartment. I don't have any kids. And what does that really mean and why do they need it?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And if you don't mind, I'm going to unpack that into a couple of different fragments.
Please.
First, estate planning it really encompasses having your assets and decisions in lifetime as well as upon death. So part of estate planning is also doing a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy, appointing someone to make financial decisions for you if you should become incapacitated or unable to do so, and someone to make medical decisions for you if you're unable to do so. So estate planning has lifetime components as well. And then upon your death, you want to make sure your assets, be it minimal or large, go to the person or people you wish them to go to. Unfortunately, there's a big misconception that the government's going to take my money. Yes, we do pay taxes, but upon death, if you don't have an estate plan, it still doesn't mean the government will take your money. It means, though, that you won't have the ability to select who the beneficiaries are of your estate and who's the fiduciary, who's the person to handle the estate, your funds upon your passing. So I think estate planning, we have to encompasses both lifetime and upon death.
So what do you think is a good age for someone to start an estate plan or start maybe even just creating a will in their advanced care directives and things like that?
So you'll probably laugh at me, but I have 3 daughters, and when each of them turns 18, they get a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy for their birthdays. My youngest actually just turned 18 last month, and the day of her birthday, what did she do? She came to my office. She signed again a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy. Why? First of all, it's the line of work I do, so my kids know what the documents mean. But again, once we turn 18, parents can no longer make decisions for their kids financially or medically. Right, when my kids go to the pediatrician now or the internist now, they have to give the doctor permission to speak with me. I can't request their medical records anymore without their permission. Or God forbid, someone's in a car accident or teenagers drinking too much. You want to be able to confirm with the doctor, with the hospital. So again, yes, we continue paying their bills, but we don't necessarily have that legal authority. Or when one of my daughters was abroad, I, as her power of attorney, signed a tax return for her. So again, once 18, I think it's important to have that power of attorney and healthcare proxy. And I think it's also then a good springboard for talking about estate planning. Did my kids have wills now? No, right? They have their lifeguarding money. But as kids get older, we demystify it, right? This estate plan is not some scary entity. It's, the same way we have to talk about finances and protecting assets from the cost of long-term care and paying our bills and filing our taxes. We have to talk about that part of adulting too, which is an estate plan. Most of my clients, when they have their first child, they then come in to do a will. And not again because of the assets, but more to choose a guardian for their young child or young children, right? We talk about estate planning really after that power of attorney healthcare proxy for anyone over 18, right? In your 30s, you might be getting married, having kids. In your 50s, you see more where the kids are, your finances have grown, you've done better, in your job, in your career. Your 70s, 80s, start planning for retirement, for grandchildren, if there's anyone who's disabled. So we have to have that estate plan grow with us depending on that stage of life.
That's so great. And, I agree with you. And I know too that we need to do that at age 18. And I think, when my kids went off to college and I was paying for it, and then I couldn't talk to them, even find out about their grades. I couldn't believe it. I was in such shock about that. It's so true. They won't even talk to you, even though you're the payer. So it's interesting that, I think a lot of people don't realize, and you being in the business, of course, that they get your kids to do that when they turn 18. It's so important. If God forbid something should happen, you need to be able to talk to their doctors or whatever. Or like you said, your daughter was traveling abroad, you needed her power of attorney to sign something. Those are things that most people don't really think about. I think we think about advanced care directives and powers of attorneys for older people that are, like in their 80s and above, because they can't make those decisions. But it's important to have one when you're young and get started. So thank you for saying all of that. Yeah, that's really good. And then also, I think the thing about one thing that I've seen is that there's people that are afraid to do a will because they don't know who to leave as the guardian for their children. And that's, how do you deal with that when someone comes to you with that issue?
I think that's a great question. So when my youngest was born, a year before 9/11 hit, and I looked at my husband and said, "This is crazy." And we just chose one of our siblings, and we did these very simple wills with one of our siblings being our oldest daughter's guardian, God forbid something should happen to us. Fast forward 10 years, we were doing a big, overseas trip. We were actually taking the whole family to Israel. And I looked at my husband, I said, we need to update our documents, right? We have 3 kids now. And I said to him, I don't think the guardian we chose 15 years before, or 10 years before is the right person. And my husband said, his name's Kenny. Kenny said to me, because they don't have daughters, and they're not going to treat our kids well, not in a bad way, but they just won't. And I'm one of 3. My husband happens to be one of 7. So we're like, okay, who are we choosing? And it was really terrible, but it was sort of like the process of elimination, and you have to be, honest. And then the kids were old enough, and my middle one or my oldest said something at a Friday night dinner, "I'm running away to Aunt so-and-so's house." And I'm like, "Oh, why?" "Because she has the candy drawer." I said, "Okay, well, if you couldn't go there, where would you go?" She's like, "Oh, this aunt's house." And my husband and I looked at each other and said, "That's who's going to be their guardian." Because they didn't even know we were having this conversation, right? There was, a 2-leveled conversation, but the kids, I think, were sort of 11, 8, and 6 at the time, but knew which aunt, other than the candy aunt, who we couldn't appoint for some other reasons, nothing bad, just it wasn't going to work. But they had a preference of which aunt or uncles they were most comfortable with. So I think, right, as your kids get a little older, not too old, you can have conversations with them about things that they don't even know they're having a conversation about.
I love that. That's such a great angle. That's perfect. Yeah. Because who do they love and who are they the most comfortable with? Not that who do they love, but who do they feel comfortable with? I love that. I'm running away to the candy aunt.
And it made sense, but that the candy aunt, it just, unfortunately she was being treated for cancer at the time. So it didn't work, but okay, so not the candy aunt, who else? But again, the kids know who they're comfortable with, right? And then it's just have those conversations, right? We all have conversations with our kids for multi-purposes. Start having those conversations. And later on, my youngest just turned 18. So thank God we don't need any guardians. And we even talked to them once about how we chose it. Because, right, kids start talking to kids. They, unfortunately, if the child's parent has passed and they have more questions. And we were able to give them reassurance. And I think you said earlier, a lot of people don't do estate planning because they're afraid to, right? But part of estate planning, I think, is actually a reassurance that it's something that we can control, right? With estate planning, when you're a young parent, you can control, God forbid something happens, who's going to be the guardian, who's going to be the trustee of any funds. When you're older, who are you appointing to make medical decisions so you can be in control of that? You're not leaving it to the kids or other people to fight, and you're not leaving it to the courts in case you need to do a guardianship. So I think part of estate planning is being able to take control for you to be able to make those decisions.
That's a great angle, and it's so true. I grew up in a family where my parents were really open with me and with us about their wills and where they were and what the whole story was. So I was, when I got older, I didn't do the healthcare proxy or the power of attorney when I turned 18. It wasn't that much. It wasn't that, organized. But when I got older, when I was married, and I knew that I needed to do this and take care of my children, because like you said, I didn't want the court appointing someone to them. And it was a conversation, but I wish I had realized what you did, like talk to them. So that's something that I think is so important to find out who they're comfortable with. And, God forbid if something happens, where they want to be. And it's always communication with everything anyway, right?
Yes. I was going to say, for our next families, we'll always do it better.
Exactly. We learn from this time.
Yes.
That's so true. Yeah. So that's great. So we're going to take a little commercial now here, and then we're going to come back and we're going to find out some more. Thank you.
Hey there. I just want to tell you a little bit about my new book that just came out called Mastering Your Financial Life Cycles. And here it is. It's how to successfully manage your money in every decade of life. I co-authored this with my CFO, Liz Levy. And together we created this manual that's going to help you through every stage of life. We talk about having a baby. We talk about young adulthood, pre-retirement, what to do when you're at that age of retirement. If you're contemplating divorce, do you need an estate plan? We cover all of these, each subject in a different chapter. And I really think that you're going to find this so helpful, because at the end of every chapter, we have checklists that you can look at and you can use, and they can be a guide for you. So this is a wonderful manual that we've created. It's available on Amazon. You can also find it on our website at judithheft.com/book. And we're here for you. If you need anything, reach out. I hope you enjoy the book. Here's another picture of it, just so you know what's going on. Here it is. And I'm really proud of it. It's my second book. And I'd love to have you read it and give me your feedback. Judy Heft, judithheft.com, financial and lifestyle concierge, celebrating 26 years in business. And over the years, I've learned so much. And what I've been trying to do is impart a little bit of this knowledge to you, so I can help all of you become as financially organized as I am.
So welcome back, Sara. So yeah, it's interesting that our commercial was in the middle, and that was really what you had talked about, every stage there too. And that's really outlined in our book. So it's a good little handy reference guide to have. So I wanted to ask you, so let's talk about, long-term care insurance and the cost of planning for it, because it's so expensive. And maybe we can touch a little bit on Medicaid and planning too.
Sure. So I like to preface talking about Medicaid and long-term care planning. But there was this great song, I think it was in the 70s or 80s, and there was the line, if I had $1 million, I'd be rich. And yes, but unfortunately, when talking about planning for long-term care, it's incredibly expensive. Right now in the metropolitan area, nursing homes are about $180,000 a year. Home care can run about $70,000, $75,000, $80,000 a year. Private pay assisted living, about $120,000, $130,000 a year. That's expensive, right? So if you have $1 million, you're running out of money rather quickly to pay for long-term care. So I think it's important to look at, I'm an attorney, I don't sell long-term care insurance. When I started out in the mid 90s, there were these phenomenal long-term care insurance policies. They were called the Cadillacs. That's how old these policies are, because I don't think we refer to cars that the high end is Cadillacs anymore. They were, the Cadillacs of policies. It was an unlimited coverage. You activated it and it covered everything. Now, right, it was bankrupting the long-term care insurance companies. Now, long-term care insurance is covers $350,000, maybe a good a higher end policy, $650,000. So I think long-term care planning and Medicaid planning need to go hand in hand with the purchase of long-term care insurance. I know a lot of people are hesitant to buy long-term care insurance because I'm not going to get old, I'm not going to need it, I'm going to just, I'm going to be fine. And again, I don't sell policies, but I like to use the analogy of a house. If you own a house, right, we have a homeowner's policy. We don't want to have a fire, right? We don't want a catastrophic incident, but we have the insurance, God forbid we do. And I look towards long-term care insurance as that same, we don't want to have to use it, but if we need it, if something happens, we sure want to be able to have it. And I like, there are a lot of newer policies now, which are the hybrid policies, where if you don't use the long-term care benefit, it becomes life insurance. Mm-hmm. So you don't lose out on paying those premiums. And again, I believe you're probably more of an expert on it than I, but there are more of these hybrid policies that I think people can stomach better. But it is important to start assessing. And also, if anyone has a big employer and the company offers long-term care insurance as a benefit, a lot of unions were doing that in the early 2000s. I would jump on it now with, if it's part of a corporate benefit, because those premiums are usually a lot less when a person just goes onto the market and purchases a policy. And we know a lot of people end up not buying long-term care insurance because of the premiums, and those premiums are skyrocketing. And again, like, my peers are like, I don't know what long-term care is going to even look like in 30 years, right? But I can tell you, I don't want to have to go into a nursing home. I don't want to have to do this. I want to stay home and age in place. But I think it is important for consumers to educate themselves and really look hand in hand with their estate planning and doing some Medicaid planning to have an eye towards protecting assets from the cost of long-term care, or knowing that there's enough money to fund long-term care.
Yeah, that's so important. I think for me, one of the first things I did when I got divorced was got long-term care insurance, because I thought, what, I'm alone. It's just going to be me who's going to take care of me. I don't want to put that burden on my children. Although, I guess the policy I have really isn't going to cover everything anyway, with the expenses, the cost of living, the way everything's gone up, and those numbers that you said about, being taking care of yourself for the rest of your life. I mean, we're living longer and we're going to need more and we want more. So, staying home and aging in place would be ideal, but not everybody can afford to do that. So it's true. So what about, is there anything on Medicaid planning that we should talk about?
So I do think, especially people with not even modest means anymore, but even in that $1 or $2 million, $3 million range, where their home's value, they probably bought the house for $30,000 or $40,000, and now it's $800,000, $900,000, $1 million, right? Home prices from the 60s, 70s to now are astronomical, especially here in the tri-state area. It's probably the best investment many people made, right? So they probably have a home worth about anywhere between $800,000, $900,000 to $1 million, a brokerage account, maybe $1 million, retirement account, IRA, a 403B, a 401k, maybe somewhere of that range. Those funds can get used up pretty quickly. So once clients come to us by their early 70s, we discuss even putting the house into what's called a Medicaid asset protection trust. The reason being, it doesn't change anything on their day-to-day. They still pay the property taxes. They still have the right to reside in the house, but it starts that 5-year look back to start at least to protect the house from the cost of long-term care. And again, they still have their other funds to be traveling. Please God, everyone, if they can and want to start traveling again. It doesn't affect the day-to-day in terms of their other assets, but at least one thing that they could do to start protecting some of the assets from the cost of long-term care. And then as people age, maybe start taking more of the cash and putting it into a Medicaid asset protection trust as people see if their care needs, they might start needing care, or if their care needs, they anticipate down the line needing, care at home or care in an assisted living or in a nursing home.
So for the Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, does the look back stop then when you put it in the trust? I don't understand how that works.
Okay, so my apologies. So what happens when a person is applying for Medicaid to pay for nursing home care, Medicaid looks back 5 years from the date of application to see if you've transferred any assets you could have used to pay for the cost of your long-term care. So it's October of 2022. I like 0 years better because math is not my specialty. I take my house and I transfer it into a Medicaid trust this month, October of 2022. By October of 2027, I'm outside that 5-year look back, and it's like the house is invisible for Medicaid purposes. Right. So we're starting to shield some assets from the cost of long-term care.
Right. And now I get what you're talking about. I wasn't exactly sure what you meant for that. But yeah, I know about the 5-year look back. I didn't understand when you put that Medicaid trust started. So that protects it. So you're not going to touch that money for 5 years. So that stays where it is. Is that what it means? Yeah.
Correct.
That makes a lot of sense. That was something I didn't know about. That's a great little strategy to use. So is Medicaid mandated by state, or is it, federal?
So that's an excellent question. So Medicaid is a federal program run by each state. So I'm in New York, you are in Connecticut. The Medicaid rules can be different. So for example, New York has a much more generous home care program. New York will cover up to 24 hours a day of home care services. Connecticut's Medicaid, for a person who's eligible, Connecticut's Medicaid, I understand, caps out at 4 or 5 hours a day and is much, much more limited in terms of home care benefits. New York allows something called a spousal refusal, right? I need long-term care in the nursing home. My husband doesn't. We can move all the assets to him. He can do something called a spousal refusal, where it says, hey, Medicaid, don't look at my assets, only look at Sarah's, and she's eligible for Medicaid. Many states don't allow for that spousal refusal like New York does. So though it's a federal program, the regulations are very state specific, which is unlike Medicare, right? Medicare is a health insurance program. It's a federal program run by CMS, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and it's the same rules for everybody. Medicare, and the reason people look towards Medicaid to pay for long-term care is Medicare doesn't cover long-term care unless it's for skilled care. For example, you're in the hospital because you broke your hip and then you need to go to rehab. Medicare can cover up to 100 days of that rehab. But once you need long-term unskilled care in a facility, then Medicare stops. And that's when we look to Medicaid or private pay or long-term care insurance.
That's really helpful clarification. I think that a lot of people get Medicaid and Medicare terminology mixed up too, because I've heard people say things about Medicaid, but they really were talking about their Medicare. They didn't really understand the difference, I think. I think some people think it's one and the same, where it's so different. They don't do the same things. So correct. That's important to know. Well, Sara, thank you so much. This has been great. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I know that you've helped our listeners a lot. How can they find you?
So I'm here in my office. The law firm, again, is Enea, Scanlan Sirignano. We're in White Plains, New York on Main Street, 245 Main Street. The phone number is 914-948-1500. And always feel free to shoot me an email. It's s.myers@esslawfirm.com. And Judy, really thank you for having me. I think it's so important to spread the message, the importance of getting your financial affairs in order, getting your estate plan in order, because the two really go hand in hand. And I think it's great for us to be out there educating. An educated consumer is our best customer. It's really good to be educating people to demystify that financial planning and the estate planning. So thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. Yes, I agree with you too. It's really important to educate people because, sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And it's just really important to listen to these things from other experts and hear what's going on. So thank you, Sara. I really appreciate having you here as my guest. Can they find you on LinkedIn too?
I'm on LinkedIn as well. There it is, Sara Meyers.
Excellent. All right, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Mastering Your Financial Life, hosted by Judy Heft. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing this show with others. You can read chapters of Judy's books and catch prior episodes of Mastering Your Financial Life at www.judithheft.com.